denied convicted murderer John Lewis Evans' request for a stay of his execution. Now, this means that Evans, who is scheduled to be strapped into the electric chair early Friday morning, can now ask the U.S. Supreme Court to block his execution. All 9 state Supreme Court justices rejected his plea. And that is it for tonight's 6 o'clock report of news, sports, and weather. The governor's State of the State address is coming up next as he addresses a joint session of the Alabama House and Senate. That'll be coming up next live from the Alabama House Chamber. And now live from the House of Representatives at the state capitol in Montgomery, Alabama, Governor George Wallace's State of the State address.
The joint session of the Alabama Legislature will come to order. Pursuant to House Joint Resolution number 3, the House and Senate have met to hear an address by His Excellency, the Governor of Alabama, the Honorable George C. Wallace. Ladies and gentlemen of the Alabama Legislature, it's always a special treat and privilege to present our governor, the Honorable George C. Wallace.
Mr. President, Mr. President, Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley, Mr. Speaker, Tom Drake, it's a pleasure to be with you, the legislature assembled in special session, and also my fellow Alabamians. I want to first thank you for the prayers that you rendered for me during the time that I was hospitalized. I want to say in the first place also that during the time that I've been governor, I've had more people seeking employment with this state than any time during the many other years that I've served as governor. I'm sorry to announce that there are no jobs at this moment with the state of Alabama. I don't think they are with any state in the union at this time. So those who are trying to acquire jobs, I regret we do not have them with this state. But I want to say there have been some very nice improvements in the matter of new and expanded industry during the last 3 months. We've announced over 20 with around 2,000 employees, and there are about 6 cities that are going to be announced in the near future, which will amount to a couple of thousand more employees in Alabama. So things are getting better to some extent to those that are finding employment that were not employed for a long time. So we do have hope. There's no need for the people of this state and for this legislature to give up hope, because there is hope. I know I am a prime example of hope, and I have hope, and the people of Alabama will have hope. Yet we today, to those who haven't found employment, we still have, as I said in my inaugural address in the first speech I spoke to you in regular session, that we have a human tragedy in this state, because there are people today who are starving and are hungry, people who are disillusioned and despondent. We hear from them. I've seen them, maybe more than any person in Alabama has ever seen them, and I know it exists. And yet, We find today with this human tragedy in Alabama and the other parts of our nation as a result of the unemployed and those who dropped from middle income to middle income, middle income have dropped almost abruptly into the abject poverty class in Alabama. This, of course, is not the easy drop and slow drop of thousands of years in other countries. It came very sudden to our people in Alabama. Nearly 750,000 people are involved who lost their jobs and their dependents, who are today in abject poverty, above those that were there before this recession came about, which is a national and international recession. But things are going to get better. In spite of the human tragedy we find in this country, in Alabama, you don't find anyone from South America, Central America, from any other part of the world trying to go to Russia or Cuba. They're all trying to come to the United States, in spite of the fact that we have all these problems. So I'd say to the people of this state, that in itself ought to give you hope that those who want to come and go away from their own countries do not want to go any place but here in the United States of America. But I do want to say that during this human tragedy, and when I spoke, my friends, to you on inaugural day and also to the session of the legislature assembled on February 4th, I've been very disappointed with the churches in Alabama. I've been very, of course, disappointed at the reception that this request to try to give more money to those agencies who are trying to ease human suffering in Alabama have not responded. And I'm sorry that this has happened. And I would like to call on the churches now, as I've said many times, the two major faiths in Alabama are Jewish and Christian, the Judeo-Christian concept and ethic, and both religions advocate caring for the wretched and the poor. I belong to the Christian faith. And Jesus Christ said, as you've done it to the least of one of these, you've done it unto me. And therefore, I do hope that people who are listening tonight might decide they're going to help more than they have helped for the Red Cross, the matter of Salvation Army, the United Way, the church charitable organizations, because people have not responded and they ought to respond. And I think they ought to think very seriously about this, including myself and all of you who assembled here tonight. I also want to say that you've got to run again, of course. That's another one of these federal court decisions that I said years ago, when some of you were not even born, that someday the federal judiciary is going to destroy this republic. And all the big newspapers said he wants to get out of the Union. Well, it looks like everybody wants to get out of the Union now, because those who criticized me in those days are now the critics themselves. But it's a shame and disgrace for you to have to run again for several reasons. One reason, we've been working together in the executive and legislative branches of state government, because people have come to the conclusion in the last administration before that, and back on when the House and the Senate fought each other and different officials fought each other, they are through with that. They don't want that. They want us to declare war on poverty and unemployment and humanitarian matters and quit fighting among each other. And therefore, I thank you as a legislative branch for having cooperated with the executive branch in the two regular sessions that we had. Yes, we worked together, and I want to applaud you, the Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker of the House, and all of you, House and Senate members, for your cooperation with the executive branch in trying to meet and solve these problems that we can. But you've only been here about 4 or 5 weeks in session, and therefore there's very little you can do. I would say that the $3 to $5 million that's going to be spent by this unconscionable court order is going to take money away from those who are hungry and poor and destitute. That $3 to $5 million could match $30 or $40 million in Medicaid, and also the matter for the elderly and handicapped and blind and people who are suffering, but we got to spend it on election after election, which makes no common sense at all. The federal court system is the most dignified thing I used to say about it. Back when I was running for the presidency, they didn't have enough in the Warren Court, enough legal brains to try a chicken thief in Barbary County, Alabama. And we're also finding that they're overruling some of these decisions. The Court of Appeals in the mental health matter, the recent decision on the mass release of prisoners, the Supreme Court said, what in the world are you doing down in Alabama? What are you district courts doing in mass releasing of prisoners? And therefore, we are beginning to see some trend come back towards sanity among the federal court system, and I hope that goes at a rapid pace. I also want to say to you tonight that I recommend this. I recommend biannual session instead of annual session. Let's meet every 2 years instead of 1 year. And if you will submit a constitutional amendment to the people of Alabama, they will ratify it. Alabama's not big enough to have the legislature meeting every year all the time. We can save approximately $6 million if you will submit that to the people and they ratify it. And that $6 million will match $40 million of Medicaid funds from the federal government to go to those who are destitute and elderly and wretched and poor. And I ask you to submit that. As far as the general fund budget is concerned, I would like to point out that we're going to recommend in our budget most of the report by the Unified Committee on Education. In order to fund education at the same appropriations as this year, we'll need some additional dollars. These dollars will come from accelerating some of the revenue sources and are not new taxes. Included in my recommendations are 200 new kindergarten units, hope to phase in over a 4-year period, 800, $48 per teacher unit for health insurance, additional funding for the local school boards and for the State Department of Education, and all of higher education will receive more funding. In the general fund, we'll recommend some money, the same money as this year, except because of one-time money this year will be necessary to have a few measures to enhance the general fund for next year. These enhancement measures are not consumer taxes, regardless of what you press might think. My emphasis and my concern is that the humanitarian program be adequately funded. Medicaid, pensions and securities, for the blind, crippled, handicapped, and elderly, for the mental health, and the state police, and the homebound program, which cares for those who are homebound and cannot get out of bed, such as quadriplegics and others. We're the only state in the union that has that particular law at this time. My friends, on the crime package, I'm presenting you a package of more than 20 bills in this administration's effort to get a handle on crime and to give some consideration to the victims of crime and to the law-abiding citizens of this state. To mention just a few of these bills, the package will include victim legislation, which will allow victims to be included at all levels of criminal trial prosecution and to be present during youthful offender hearings. A tough pornography law which has been upheld as constitutional in other states. Legislation to limit severely the offense of insanity and to require court action before release of the criminally insane. Allow for adult treatment of certain offenders who had previously benefited from juvenile treatment, and lowering the juvenile age to 16 in certain cases. Laws to prohibit certain classes of dangerous and violent criminals from being released on work release, and also making escape from work release a felony. New and much tougher drunk driving laws in Alabama. Laws and laws to allow the jailing of certain criminals after they have been convicted and while they are awaiting appeal. tougher laws to deal with drug dealers and those who traffic in drugs. My friends, on the highway matter, I would like to say that we have all the funds necessary this year to match the federal funds that are available. On top of that, we acquired $46,600,000 extra dollars from other states who had turned that money back and are using on the interstate system during this year, and the contracts will be let this year. I would also, in getting ready to come to a conclusion, and that I think we've covered most everything at the present time, is that I want to again call upon those people who I hope will respond to this matter of humanitarian care for those who are newly unemployed, especially in Alabama, because there's much suffering yet going on in this state. And if you only served in the governor's office 1 week, you would find more appeals have come to us in 3 months. It's a matter of hardship, real tough cases involving humanitarian and help for the aged and blind and crippled and those who've lost the insurance, more in 3 months than I received in all the other years combined as governor of Alabama. Now that's the situation that does exist, but there is hope, and things are going to get better. But I want to say we still have those we ought to look after, and I hope the people of this state will respond more than they've done for in the past. I again want to thank Lieutenant Governor Baxter and Speaker Drake and all of you in this legislature for your cooperation. As I've said a moment ago, they want us to declare war on the things that are affecting the people of this state and try to join together and work together, all the phases of government, and stop this fighting among ourselves and among different branches of the state legislature. If there's anything that's been proven in an election contest in the last several years, it's proved that people are tired of that. And I can assure you that they are tired of it. And I know that I want to again thank you for your cooperation, and I'm very sorry that you're having it run and cost this extra money that could be used to help so many people that ought to be used. I might also say that I would, as I said in my inaugural address, a state, a nation who forgets its poor will soon lose its soul. So I'm very concerned about these particular matters, and I want to tell you fellow Alabamians that we should have faith and hope. As I said a moment ago, I'm one that knows what I'm talking about, because hope is there and hope can be reached, and there's more hope yet to come to the economy of this state and to this country. And I don't believe the Lord is going to let this nation go down the drain and not let us fail if we do not fail him. So my friends here tonight, I made a pretty brief speech. I was going to make a better one, but the federal courts messed that up again. But I would like to say to all of you and to all Alabamans, may God bless us all. Thank you very much. I'll have to wait a time ago. Thank you. Good picture. Oh, folks, thank you all. Thank you.
Governor George Wallace has just completed about an 18-minute address to the members of the Alabama legislature who met in joint session in the Alabama House chamber. Governor Wallace, at the conclusion of his speech, made reference once again to the federal courts having messed up his speech, a reference, of course, to the fact that the governor perhaps would have laid out a more extensive legislative plan for members of the Alabama legislature. But once again, as he made reference to, this is an election year again. Governor George Wallace was greeted by about 2 minutes of applause as he entered the House chamber, and he's still shaking hands with the members of the legislature. That's Billy Joe Camp, his press secretary, Senator Larry Dixon from Montgomery. We have other members of the legislature coming over, trying to get a moment to speak to the governor as he makes his way from the House chamber. Also, Governor Wallace showed a great deal of compassion this evening when he was talking about the poverty in the state of Alabama. He talked about the fact that he is very regretful that there are no jobs, no state jobs to be offered to people because of the fact that the money situation is so tight for state government. He did make reference, however, to some new industries and new jobs that are coming available because of the expansion of some existing industries and new industries that are seeking a place in Alabama. He also talked about hope. He said that he himself is a prime example of the fact that hope does exist in these hard economic times. He kept referring to the human tragedy of poverty. He talked about how it came suddenly on many of the families across the state of Alabama, many of the family members who suddenly have lost the breadwinner in their family, and also they now find themselves in a situation where this sudden poverty has affected all of their dependents. The governor said that he is disappointed that churches and certain social agencies in the state of Alabama have not heeded his call in the inauguration speech, where he said these agencies and churches should come to the rescue of some of the poverty-stricken members of the Alabama citizenry. Chris Grimshaw of our staff and Dennis Latham have been watching what's been happening. Chris Grimshaw is there with Senator John Teague. And Chris, I wonder if you could get the senator down and get his reaction to what the governor had to say tonight. Chris?
Thank you, Bob. Just a couple of minutes ago, Senator, we were listening to the governor talk about enhancement measures to bring in extra revenue, which he said were not tax-raising measures. Would you agree with that?
Chris, I haven't seen the measures, so I couldn't say with any certainty what they are. As you know, any enhancement measures or revenue producing sources have to originate in the House of Representatives, so we'll have plenty of time to look at them, but I'm really not aware of any specifics that the governor talked about.
How about your reaction to his speech overall?
Well, I think that basically the theme of his speech was that the harmony that would be necessary between the executive branch and the legislative branch to solve some of the problems that we're going to be faced with, and also things that he felt like were issues that maybe would be beneficial to the general public. I don't happen to agree with all of them, but on the other hand, I will certainly give all of them every bit of consideration possible.
Thank you, Senator Teague. That's Senator Teague, who is the Senate President Pro Tem. Bob?
Thanks very much, Chris. Chris, if you're still on the line there, a couple of things that I'm sure a lot of people are interested in tonight. Once again, we heard a little bit of the fire of George Wallace and a couple of evaluations, shall we say, of the federal court system. And this is preying heavily on his minds, and I'm sure on the minds of all of the men and women of the legislature who have to run again this fall or perhaps this summer.
Well, Bob, one of the things the governor did not do was mention any shortening or abbreviation of this regular session or indicate when he might call a special election to fulfill the court order. So his effort was mainly to more or less expound his disgust with the federal court system, and his handling of that court order he did not talk about. I'd like to move on to one other thing. I have Senator Hinton Mitchum with me here. He was chairman of the Finance and Taxation Committee of the Senate. Chairman, are you familiar with any of the enhancement measures the governor has proposed? They will originate in the House, but will make it over to the Senate.
Not exactly. I have been working with them the last few days mainly on the education budget and the general fund budget, and I would like to say at this time that I feel like the governor's staff, Mr. Stigall and his staff have done an outstanding job in preparing these budgets with such short monies this year. I know the general fund budget, for instance, is approximately the same amount of money, that the prorated amount this year, which is probably the most conservative budget that has ever been introduced in this legislation during the last 25 years. And actually, the education budget is actually the amount that it was actually received by the educational groups this past year. So overall, I think the governor's office has done an outstanding job in what they have presented to us here tonight.
As I'm familiar with the budgets, the general fund budget is about $40 million more than the actual receipts this year. So that is an increase that they are putting into the general fund, and the education fund is an increase of about 5% over the prorated level of this year. So they're banking on the windfall monies to come in and help out fulfilling the budget.
Well, there's several measures that they plan to present in the next few days, and also, you know, we're talking about refunding the Heritage Trust Fund, the oil lease monies, which would generate about $20 million up front, or probably about $2 or $3 million per year over a period of 19 or 20 years. So we do have some other measures that the legislature and also the governor's office is looking into, and hopefully we will be able to fund the various agencies, because they are in a tight situation. Unless we can come up with some additional monies for the general fund, you know, it's going to be real tough for these agencies to operate.
So you're comfortable the governor has not stretched dollars too far?
No, I think they've done an outstanding job. I feel like that, as I said, this is the most conservative budget that I have ever seen introduced since I've been in the legislature. And some people have been around here a long time, say in the last 25 years. And hopefully this budget will be one that will not be in proration, both the general fund and education budget.
Thank you, Senator Mitchum. I appreciate it. Chairman of the Senate Finance and Taxation Committee. Bob?
Thanks very much, Chris. As you can see, a lot of people still left in the House chamber this evening after Governor Wallace's speech. One of the things that the governor talked about this evening in his address was the crime legislation that he's going to have introduced in this particular regular session of the legislature. That includes crime bills that will involve victims' rights. He also said that he would like to see stiffer legislation in the area of pornography, especially with laws that have been found to be constitutional in other states and have stood the test of the courts. He also said that he would like to see more legislation in the area of insanity pleas in criminal cases, and he also said he would like to see adult treatment of some people who had been under the juvenile status and juvenile statutes in the state of Alabama. He also said that he would like to see the juvenile age, the legal age for juvenile status in the state of Alabama, lowered to 16 in some cases, he said. And one measure in the crime package that brought applause from the members of the House and Senate was for new, tougher drunk driving laws. Let's go back now to Chris Grimshaw again with another reaction to the governor's speech tonight. Chris?
Bob, I have now the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, who will handle the revenue-raising measures that will originate in the House. Mr. Coburn, Tom Coburn, those enhancement measures, would you agree with the governor that they are not new taxes?
Yes, I would. They are not new taxes areas. There is not a single one of them that I can think of right now that you would consider a consumer tax.
Well, now you have
Some are one-time funding that would bring money in for one time that is needed this year in both the general fund and the education fund to bring them up either to the prorated funding or to the previous appropriated funding.
Now you have an increase in the base price of alcohol. You have an increase in the tax or the fees for copies of driver's license and accident reports. You have an increase in the corporate consumer tax.
These are service things that is rendered. The increase in the alcohol is not a tax that's being put on by the legislature. This was action taken by the ABC board. The only thing that the legislature is doing is appropriating money to the general fund. They have had nothing to do with the alcohol tax.
Okay, but are you comfortable that the budgets are not stretching the dollars too far? Will there be proration again?
Well, I am more comfortable with the budgets that I introduced today than any budget that I've seen in the previous 4 years, because we have overextended the expected income, and we have not done that in these budgets that was introduced today. So I'm more comfortable, in particular with the signs of some increase in the state economy.
Thank you, Mr. Coburn, very much. That's Tom Coburn, who is chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in the House. Bob?
Thanks, Chris. And that is it for our broadcast, our live origination from TV 12 of the State of the State address by Governor Wallace. Our special thanks to the WSFA engineering staff and our technical staff also for making this live telecast possible in that sea of humanity and politicians at the state capitol. I'm Bob Howell. Thank you for watching.
You could win a round trip to anywhere in the United States via Delta Airlines and McDonald's Breakfast Sweepstakes. Visit any participating McDonald's and fill in an entry form. They'll draw one entry each week of one lucky person who will win 2 round-trip tickets to anywhere in the continental U.S. Delta Airlines flies, plus $100 cash. There'll be 4 trips given away in the Montgomery area. So come in for a great breakfast at McDonald's and win a trip via Delta Airlines to the city of your choice in the McDonald's Delta Breakfast Sweepstakes.
It's all yours and it's all mine. Bring best time of the day. Miller High Life.
Saving does it again. Due to the tremendous success of our recent RCA TV sale, we're going to repeat it. For a limited time, you pay only $310 for this 19-inch RCA color TV, $390 for this 19-inch remote control RCA TV, this 25-inch RCA color TV, only $475, this 25-inch remote control RCA color TV, $590. Every RCA TV we stock is now on sale. If you're about to purchase a TV, you won't do better than save an appliance.
We're TV 12, just watch us now. We're NBC, just watch us now.
We're NBC, just watch us now.